All right, hey Algebra 2 fam. So today we're going to be talking about completing the square. And I know the moment that I said completing the square, half of you were like, no, not this thing again. So completing the square is a technique that we use to find the max and the min value, also known as the vertex. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about going from standard to vertex form for quadratic functions. We also use it to change or simplify the form of an algebraic expression, and we can use it for solving quadratic equations. So right now you know how to factor. You know how to solve by square roots. Okay, and then we learned about the quadratic formula. And then this is the next one. So completing the square is another technique that we can use in order to help us kind of factor and solve from there. Now, it's probably not the best way to do things. Being said, sometimes it's a little helpful depending on what we're trying to find or what the question is actually asking us. The reason why it's called completing the square, and it's just a little fun fact, that if you use those algebra tiles back in like algebra 1, or if you don't know what I'm talking about with algebra tiles, it's okay. If you were, and you kind of break it up into the two pieces, so if you're trying to find the factors of it, you would break this box over here, and then these two pieces you would break here and here. You see that b divided by 2, that's going to come into play a little bit later. And then there's this missing piece right here that we have to add in there. And again, these are the steps kind of to completing the square, but I'm going to talk about them in algebraic terms in just one second. But there's actually a visual representation when you use those algebra tiles. But how that works, type into YouTube algebra tiles. And it's kind of interesting, but up to you. So this first equation that we got right here, the first step that you're going to do for completing this square, and I'm going to put the steps over here because I'm a very step kind of person, is you're going to add the c term to the other side, or subtract depending on what sign it is. Okay, you're going to add the c term to other side. That's the first thing that you're going to do. So over here, we've got this -7. All right, so we're going to add him over to the other side. So we've got x squared plus 6x equals 7. Fantastic. All right, so the next step that we're going to do is we're going to take our b term. Our b term is the 6, right? Because we know from standard form, and standard form is that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Our standard form, that b is our 6, right? And I know my b's look like 6s already, so should be fine, right? Okay, so step 2, you're going to take your b term, divide it by 2, square it, and then you're going to add that to both sides. And I know that's like a lot of information on step 2, but you know, step 2 is really important. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 6, divide it by 2, square it, and then we're going to add it to both sides. Normally what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a plus blank space after this side and this side, just to remind me, hey, you got to add that thing in, right? So 6 divided by 2 is going to give me 3, and then 3 squared is going to give me 9. So I'm going to put a 9 right here and right here. Okay, so that is step 2. On step 3, what you're going to do is you're going to factor the left-hand side. Okay, so if we were to factor this guy, we're actually going to get this to be set up where we can say x plus and our b divided by 2 term. And what I mean by that is 6 divided by 2 is 3, right? So 3 is going to go right here, and we're going to square it. And if you're like, nah, I don't believe you, you could actually do the big X, and then you could do the box method here, and you'll realize that your factors are 3 and 3. Okay, the whole point of completing the square is to make it so that this side is simplified. It should be x plus a number squared. Okay, and if it's not, then maybe you didn't complete the square right. Okay, and then on step 4, what you're going to do is you're going to simplify the right side. Simplify the right side. Okay, and what I mean by that is 7 plus 9, which is going to give us 16. Boom. Okay, so this is how you factor by completing the square. Now, if our instructions were to solve, okay, so solve means that you're going to have to take the square roots of both sides and solve from there. So on step 5, we're going to take the square root of both sides, and we're going to get x plus 3 equals positive and negative 4. Okay, and then we would move, so then we would move 3 to the other side, and I know that was a big jump. We would move 3 to the other side, and then we would add and subtract that 4. So if we added negative 3 plus 4, that would give us 1, and then negative 3 minus 4, which is going to give us that negative 7. Okay, and really the goal of completing the square is to put it in that vertex form, but you really have to understand what vertex form is, what standard form is, but we'll see that on the next one as well. All right, so on number 2, one thing that we notice on this one is that our a term is bigger than 1. So that's going to be a little interesting for us. So again, the first step that we're going to do is we're going to add c to the other side. So here it is again. We're going to add c to the other side. Add c to other side. Okay, so we're going to add that 3 to the other side. So we're going to get 2x squared minus 10x plus, I'm going to put a blank space over there just to remind me, hey girl, you got to put something there, okay? And you got 3 on the other side as well. Now, in the last problem that we did, the a term was 1. And in this case, our a term is 2, which is bigger than 1. So we need to divide this a all the way through. Okay, what do I mean by that? So this is like the extra step, if you will. You're going to divide a through, okay? So we're going to see that. So we're going to divide by 2 all the way through. So if we do that, we're going to get x squared minus 5x plus blank equals 3 halves. And I'm just going to leave it as 3 halves. You could turn it into a decimal if you absolutely want to, but you're normally going to see your answer choices as 3 halves. Okay? So now we're kind of back on track with our steps. So that next step is going to be to take b and divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it and add it to both sides. Okay, so we're going to take that negative 5, divide it by 2, square it, and then we're going to add it to both sides. So negative 5 divided by 2, we're going to go into our handy dandy calculator. We're going to go negative 5 divided by 2, and then we're going to square it, and we're going to add it to both sides. So that's going to be 6.25. Or if you want to leave it in fraction form, you can hit math frac, and that'll give us 25 over 4. I personally like fractions. I know the rest of the world does not function that way. It's okay. You can leave it at 6.25. That's fine. Okay? Our next step is going to be to factor that left-hand side. So factor. Okay, so over here, just like on the last problem, we're going to take x, and then we're going to have minus our b divided by 2 term. So 5 divided by 2 is going to give us that 2.5, or if you want to leave it as a fraction, that's fine too. And the reason why there's going to be that negative sign in between is because our b term was negative. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you're writing it out. Over here, we're going to combine like terms or add the right side. Okay, so remember, you have to have a common denominator for adding fractions. So we're going to take this and we're going to change it to have a 4 in the denominator. The way we're going to do that is we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 2 in order to have that bottom number be 4. And so if we combine our like terms, we're going to get 31 over 4. Okay. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to solve. So, and I kind of like leaving this one as a fraction because we're going to see some cute little trick in just one second. So I'm actually going to leave this one as a fraction. This is going to be 5 divided by 2. Okay. And it's just easier for me to notice it. Okay. So in order for me to solve, what's going to happen is, so step 6, if the question asks you to solve, what you're going to do is take the square root of both sides first. Okay, and that's going to give me x minus 5 halves in the denominator, or over here. I don't know why I put parentheses around it. And then over here, we can't take the square root of 31, so that's going to just be j chilling underneath the square root. But the square root of 4 is going to give me 2. Okay, and remember, when we take the square root of both sides, we're going to have that positive negative, right? Okay, and if we want to move all of our numbers to one side and then leave our x on the other, we're going to add that 5 halves to the other side. So our final answer should look like this. X equals 5 halves plus or minus square root of 31 over 2. So sometimes your answer might be written like this. However, there's an easier way to write this out. Notice how the denominator on both of these is 2. So if that's the case, what we can do is we can actually kind of combine these in a way. And we can say 5 plus or minus the square root of 31 all over 2, because they're both over that 2 term, or that 2 value, which is probably where you're going to see most of your answer choices be. Okay, this might be a possibility, but this is more likely. Okay. All right, on the next one, what's going to happen is you've got this negative term out front. So you're still going to follow your steps. So that first step is going to be to move your C term to the other side. Okay, and this time it's a plus, so we're going to actually subtract that 7 and move it to the other side. So this is going to give us negative x squared minus 6x plus blank minus 7 plus blank. Okay, and then our a term isn't 1, but it's this negative 1. So what we're going to have to do is take that negative 1, and we're going to divide it all the way through. Okay, so if we divide everything by negative 1, it's going to make our lives a little bit easier. So we're going to divide. Okay, so we're going to get x squared plus 6x plus blank equals positive 7 plus blank. Whew. And then we're back on track with all of our steps. We're going to take our b value, divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it and add it to both sides. So 6 divided by 2. We're going to square it, we're going to add it to both sides. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, 3 squared is 9. And then look what happened. So if I do my step 4 is to factor, right? Factor this mess. So we're going to get x plus, now remember it's b divided by 2 terms. So 6 divided by 2 is 3 squared equals 7 plus 9, which is 16. And I kind of jumped ahead and went to step 5. Step 5 is to add the right side. We already did that. Now, if on step 6 it says solve, and sometimes if it just says factor, this is what you're going to leave it as. But if it says solve, you're going to actually take the square root of both sides, and you're going to get x plus 3 equals positive and negative 4. If I move 3 to the other side, I'm going to get x equals positive 1 and negative 7. And that's exactly what our first equation was, the answer choices. Okay, so just pay attention to what your a term is. That's going to be really, really, really important. Remember that a term. Okay, so that's really going to change some stuff if you don't pay attention to it. Last one. Okay, and on this problem, what we notice is that it's missing our b term. Okay, so if it's missing b term, if it's missing the b term, then you cannot complete the square. Okay, so you would have to use like quadratic formula or some type of other method. So just keep that in mind. So again, completing the square really isn't necessary per se, but also at the same time, y'all did see it when you were creating the equation for circles. You're probably going to need it for pre-cal when you start doing like ellipses and that kind of stuff. And so it's an important skill, but you may not need it this year, but you're probably going to need it in the future. So hopefully this helped. Make sure that you go back and rewatch this because you may not have gotten it the first time, but it takes a couple times before you get to it. All right. Have a great day.